In the year 2000, a struggling little startup offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million. Blockbuster passed. That startup was Netflix, today worth more than $300 billion. And this is where every version of the story agrees: the giant was just too dumb to see the future. But that story is wrong. Because a few years later, Blockbuster built a weapon that was actually closing in on Netflix. And then something destroyed it that had nothing to do with Netflix at all. Here's the version most people carry around. Blockbuster was a dinosaur, fat, lazy, addicted to late fees, laughing while Netflix's little red envelopes ate its lunch. It's a clean story. It lets every one of us feel a little smarter than a multi-billion-dollar company. There's just one problem with it. The people running Blockbuster saw Netflix coming clearly, and they built a plan to kill it. For a while, that plan was working. The man with the plan was Blockbuster's CEO, John Antioco. And in 2005, he did something that sounded insane. He killed late fees. The single thing customers hated most about Blockbuster gone. It was an enormous bet. The company estimated that dropping late fees would cost it somewhere between $250 and $300 million in operating income that year. Wall Street hated it. But Antioco understood the real war wasn't about movies. It was about which company customers didn't resent. Then came the real weapon. In November 2006, Blockbuster launched something called Total Access. And here was the move Netflix simply could not match. You could rent your movies by mail, just like Netflix. But when you were done, you could hand the DVD back at any Blockbuster store. And walk out with your next rental right then, for free. No envelope. No waiting 3 days for the mail. Online convenience, plus the one thing Netflix would never have: stores on the ground. And it worked. By the end of 2006, Blockbuster had roughly 2 million online subscribers. Netflix still led with about 5.7 million. But look at the direction. Blockbuster was now growing faster, adding more than 500,000 subscribers in a single quarter. For the first time, the gap between them was closing, not widening. Blockbuster wasn't playing the dinosaur anymore. It was hunting. So how do you lose a war you are winning? You don't lose it to your competitor. You lose it to your own boardroom. Enter Carl Icahn, one of the most feared corporate raiders alive. Back in 2005, Icahn had launched a proxy fight and won 3 seats on Blockbuster's board. He thought Antioco was overpaid and reckless, and he would spend the next 2 years at war with the one man whose strategy was actually working. And the breaking point wasn't strategy at all. It was a bonus. Antioco and the Icahn-led board went to war over his pay. He believed his contract owed him $7.6 million. The board first offered him $2.3. They finally settled at $3. And over that gap, a few $1 million, to a company worth billions. In 2007, with Total Access still growing, Antioco agreed to walk away by the end of the year. The right strategy, the right man to run it, pushed out the door over a bonus. His replacement was a man named Jim Keyes. Keyes looked at Total Access, the very thing closing the gap on Netflix, and decided it was too expensive. So he raised the price of online rentals. He brought back late fees. And he turned the company's attention away from the mail business, back toward the stores. In one stroke, he took the single weapon that frightened Netflix, and quietly put it back in the box. But here's what makes it a tragedy. Even if the boardroom had left Total Access alone, Blockbuster was fighting to win a war that was already ending. On January 16, 2007, Netflix quietly launched something new. Streaming. Watch now, about 1,000 movies you could play instantly, no disc at all. Blockbuster saw it coming and tried to answer. It bought a digital service called MovieLink for $6.6 million. But its own systems were still, in its CEO's words, programmed in Fortran. It was trying to win yesterday's war with the day before yesterday's technology. And underneath all of it sat an even older problem. Go back to 2004. Blockbuster was spun off from its parent company, Viacom. And it did not leave empty-handed. To fund that separation, it loaded itself with around $1 billion in debt, before the race with Netflix had even truly begun. So the whole time Antioco was betting on the future. The company was already carrying an anchor. And an anchor doesn't matter until the water gets rough. And in 2008, the water got very rough. So here's the uncomfortable question. Was it really the boardroom that killed Blockbuster? Jim Keyes, the man who reversed Total Access, says no. He argues the real killer was that $1 billion in debt. About a third of it was coming due in 2009, right as the global credit crisis hit. When a rating agency flashed a warning, the movie studios that supplied Blockbuster panicked. and demanded cash up front instead of 90-day terms, pulling roughly $300 million out of the company in weeks. And that, he says, not Netflix, is what finally broke it. And on September 23, 2010, it did break. Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy, still carrying around $900 million in debt. The company that could have owned streaming was sold off, store by store, until there was almost nothing left. Netflix? It never slowed down. Today, it's worth over $300 billion. So who actually killed Blockbuster? The honest answer is, not one thing. A boardroom that pushed out the man with the winning plan. A successor who put that plan back in the box. $1 billion of debt from a spin-off almost no one talks about. And a market shifting to streaming faster than anyone expected. But notice what is not on that list. Being blind. Blockbuster saw Netflix. It built the right answer. It was closing the gap. The lesson here isn't adapt or die. Blockbuster adapted. The lesson is that you can do almost everything right and still lose. If your own house is at war with itself. If this changed the way you see it, subscribe. Next time, we break down another giant that beat itself.